Hello everybody, welcome to the Wonky Angle, where I talk about electronic music, both new and old. And today I'm talking about the 8th album from Air, Le Voyage dans la Lune. Le Voyage dans la Lune. I'm not French. So now we've made it through 7 Air albums, which have turned out mixed but good results. We now finish off the discography review with their most recent album from 2012. This project is kinda special in that it's technically a film soundtrack, but one to a film that was released all the way back in 1902, being A Trip to the Moon, directed by Georges Méliès, probably butchered that. Famous for being the first science fiction film ever, and also for this rather iconic picture of the man in the moon with a rocket stuck in its eye. That little 14-minute film is important here, as I own the copy with the DVD included. It's a restored color edition. Oh crap, it came loose. Well, yes, apparently there was a color version back in 1902. You can tell they were just figuring out how to use color in movies. I think they painted over each individual frame or something. And, I think it's overall pretty cool, worth watching, especially if you're curious on what century-old films are like, or if you're a film student like I am. But this isn't about the film, it's about the soundtrack. Now, given that the film is only about 14 minutes long, and the album is 32 minutes long, which is also really short, it's probably no surprise that the film does not incorporate every song on the album. It includes Astronomic Club, Décollage, Lune, Lava, Sonic Armada, Retour sur Terre, and Parade, in that order. Although that leaves 4 songs unaccounted for, and weirdly enough there's also a track that only appears in the film but not in the album. A more electronic and mechanical tune is the soundtrack to the scene where they build the rocket near the beginning. But the score, I think, complements the film very well, although I can tell some people might disagree with me there. And it gives that whole adventure in space feel, some tracks fitting better than others. Maybe it's a little modern sounding, but I think it works rather well and improves certain tracks on the album that I think wouldn't have been as memorable had they not been included on the film. A good example of such is the opener track, Astronomic Club. This track accompanies the opening scene in which a group of old men are planning the trip to the moon. It's very intense and dramatic with big booming timpani drums, little male choirs that go oh, and distorted Pink Floyd-ish guitars with a more peaceful but mysterious outro. Before I saw the film, I questioned why this track was placed first, although I figured, film soundtracks are weird like that. But yeah, now it's pretty obvious, and it makes much more sense in the context of the film. 7 Stars was the first single from the album, and actually felt like a real Air song. It was once again very dramatic and intense and epic, but still had that kind of dreaminess that Air are known for. And since it had lyrics, it turned out to be pretty catchy as well. Retour sur Terre and Parade came next, and I kinda count these as the same track. The former, as you might guess from the translated title, Back to Earth, is the scene in which the rocket falls back to Earth. And Parade being the ending in which everybody celebrates the success of the voyage, and as well as this track is also another single, by the way. The former is a quick and peaceful piano interlude, and the latter is a big, epic, fast-paced, rock-influenced tune in the same vein as Eat My Beat from Love 2. I distinctly remember this track not being well received when it came out, but much like with Eat My Beat, I absolutely loved it on first listen. Moon Fever, I think, was most people's favorite, as it did have that more peaceful feel to it that called back to the old days of Air. It's mostly piano-focused and very quiet, but has a little bit of a mysterious and brooding bend to it. Strangely enough, this track did not appear in the film, but although I think it could have fit in one particular scene which was instead occupied by lava, but we'll get to that. Regardless, this track had that very peaceful but dark feel to it, much like something from the back end of Virgin Suicides. Sonic Armada, on the other hand, is another more rock-influenced track that could have fit along the 10,000 Hertz Legend lineup, with lots of crazy electronic effects, cool guitars, little electric piano riffs, and more. Again, it's very cool, albeit maybe a touch repetitive track that's, regardless, lots of fun and fits the film scene quite well, being the scene with the, moon aliens. Who Am I Now is another track with lyrics that's much more along the Moon Fever lines. Very mysterious, dark, brooding, and is also easily the catchiest track on the album. Decollage is the scene in which they load the rocket into a giant cannon and fire it into the moon, and has some cool timpani sounds and piano arpeggios. It's another track that worked better in the context of the film, though before I had seen the film, this track was almost entirely forgettable. Anyway, Cosmic Trip is another favorite of mine that doesn't appear in the film. It's very off-kilter and odd, with all these twinkling bell noises, and more electronic effects, as well as some odd screechy string section. But it's also quite bouncy and fun as well. A trip it is indeed. But the album ends with Lune, the soundtrack to the most iconic scene of the film, and also the least remarkable track on the album by a wide margin. And finally Lava, which it basically combines the sounds of the rest of the album into one track. It starts out peaceful and warm, like the sounds of Moon Safari and Pocket Symphony, and ends in an intense rock trip out. It's all over the place, but makes for a memorable closer to the album, and works nicely for the scene in which the old men land on the moon and try to spend the night there and are watched over by other various celestial beings that also look weirdly human. A Trip to the Moon is a very weird movie, in case you couldn't figure it out. But overall, this soundtrack is very nice. While 4 years ago I thought from the title I'd be getting something more like Moon Safari, this album feels much darker and more epic, and sounds just as you'd expect Air to sound like at this point in their career. It's definitely not among their best work. For one thing, despite being twice as long as the film, the album is still by far their shortest, and I wish there was more of it. But for what we got, I liked it quite a bit, and I'll be looking forward to whatever Air plan on doing for the next full-length album. If you like Air's darker and more rock-influenced side and have a half hour to spare, this would be worth checking out. I'm overall feeling a 7.5 out of 10. Favorite tracks, 7 stars, Parade, Moon Fever, Sonic Armada, Cosmic Trip, and Lava. Least favorite track, Lune. But of course, this is just my opinion. You can feel free to disagree with it, but I'd like to hear your thoughts, so leave the comments in the comment thing down there. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all for today. See you next time.